Hi, my name is Jay Clark. I'm an AI ML specialist at AWS. In this video, I'm going to take you through a quick prompt template that I use a lot when I need to make assumptions from a user input to a model explicit. So something that often happens, especially with users that aren't sort of very familiar with LLMs and prompting and all of that, is that they can leave a lot of ambiguity in their prompts. And people that have a lot of experience with this know this is not something you want. And so I have a prompt that I usually use that tries to just make those assumptions explicit, right? And so I'm going to show that to you here. Now, if you haven't seen this interface before, I think there's another video on this, and I'll link it below. But the whole idea is I use this for a lot of my prompt templating. And so I'll start with some system information, some role information. And this will be, you're an engineer tasked with adding contextual information to any text queries. And this includes asking follow-up questions. Your output should always be a valid JSON, of course. Show all of your steps and assumptions. Right, so great start there. And we're actually going to make this a single shot just to show the model what we mean by this. You can add more. I only need one example in a lot of my use cases. And also, this is going to allow us to ensure the format of the JSON that we get out as well, because that's always something that's important. And so my example will be something like this. So I start with the sort of query or sort of prompt I might expect to get from a user or external user or users sort of not well versed in prompting these models, right? What are some advanced prompting techniques? Right, so this person is, let's say they're interested in generative AI, but sort of don't know a lot about prompting it per se. And then we also have a current year. And I've added this in because in a lot of cases, especially when there's some temporal aspect, I in general will add the year. So let's say this is the prompt that the user actually made, and then when this is passed to the system, I would add something like the current year, right, or the past year, or whatever sort of time unit is needed there. And now we'll give an example of what we expect out from the model. And really what this is going to comprise of is just any assumptions that the model has made. And I want it to be explicit in those. I'm making the following assumptions, colon, prompting is referring to generative AI and using large language and image generation models. This is the most likely request area. Since requester is requesting advanced techniques, I should use research in the past few years. Some example prompting techniques will make the query more explicit. Okay, fine. This is fine, and we could play a lot more with the sort of assumptions we'd want out and tailor to our use case, but this will be okay for us. And then we also need to give what's the actual output we're going to use, right? The JSON. And so for that, we'll have our output query, and this will include the original query, right? So what are some advanced prompting techniques, right? And notice that I don't have the current year piece because I'm not expecting the user to actually put that in, as well as the contextual query, right? What research has been published between 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023 that discusses generative AI and large language models and image generation models. Specifically, what's available for techniques like chain of thought prompting, role playing with generative models, and React prompting. Include related and necessary information like understanding retrieval augmented generation, transformer architectures, and so on and so forth. So a lot of contextual information here, a lot of assumptions that are being made, but at least they are explicit here, right? So from the prompt of what are some advanced prompting techniques, we have something that here are the sort of prompting techniques I want. Here's the time range I want. Here's the ideas that I want represented in your answer. And so this by itself can produce better answers, but generally with a lot of these, at least in production systems, you'll connect to some knowledge base, right? Some backend, some data source, etc., that you'll be querying against. And when you do those semantic comparisons, there is a lot less to sort of compare here. This is less semantically meaningful than what we have here. which is, I would say, semantically rich, or richer at least than the original prompt. So this can be good for a number of applications, not just sort of direct question answering. So here is our single shot example. Now let's test this out. So I'll have user input, and let's actually make this a variable. So this will be our prompt, and we can now add this variable down below. What's a good example? Okay. Let's take something from finance. So for this example, we have what might be the outlook for stock over the next 2 years. And again, I'm also going to add a year piece here, current year, January 2023. Let's say June 2024, something along those lines. And we have that as our variable. We have our single shot example. So now we can test. Oh, let me also change the model. So let's try out Mistral, give it a little room. Let's try, let's keep Sonnet. And then let's also try Llama. All right. A decent representation. And let's test. And in a few short seconds, we should get the results from these. Okay. And so now let's sort of start left to right, right? So let's start with Mistral. Tokens in, tokens out. Okay, reasonable. 8 seconds. It's a bit long, but we could probably optimize a bit there. But I'm making the following assumptions. Great. This is what I want to know. The requester is asking about general outlook of the stock market. Okay. The requester is interested in outlook of the stock market for the next 2 years, specifically from June 2024 to 2026. The requester is interested in outlook of the U.S. stock market. Okay. The requester is interested in outlook for major indices such as S&P 500, Dow Jones, Nasdaq Composite. Okay, this is great. Making some of these explicit. The requester is interested in the outlook for various sectors within the stock market: technology, healthcare, finance. Really good. Individual stocks, but not specific ones. Okay. And now we have our original query. So it might be the outlook of stocks in the next 2 years, as well as our contextual query. What's the outlook for U.S. stock market from June 2024 to June 2026? Including information about the outlook for major stock indices such as the S&P 500, Dow Jones Industrial Average, Nasdaq Composite. Also include information about the outlook of various stocks within the stock market, such as technology, healthcare, and finance, and include information about the outlook for individual stocks, but not specific ones. Okay. There's more information, there's more semantic information in this query than in the original, what's the general outlook over the next 2 years. Let's try out Sonnet. So the query is asking about potential future performance, overall stock market in the next 2 years. That's great. Relevant factors, economic conditions, interest rates. Okay, so there's a bit of additional information sort of outside the stock market. I like that. And then as an AI system, I don't have specific insight into the future markets. Okay, that's great, and I'm not asking you to necessarily. And so now we have our original query, our contextual query, and based on current economic conditions in June 2024 and forecast by major financial analyst institutions, what's the general outlook of predictions for the performance of the overall stock market over the next 2 years until June 2026? Please summarize factors like GDP growth. Okay, this is great. Interest rates, corporate earnings, investor sentiment, and any major events or risks that could impact stock valuation for this period. Okay, so I like this one, and we even got the output as a specific formatted JSON because it did the new line there. But this is a good prompt, different from this, and I think one of the reasons why you can sometimes see, I'll say, differences in some of these models with these answers are that they're just different assumptions behind the scenes, right? So this is very stock based, right? S&P 500, Dow Jones, Nasdaq, versus very, I'll say, economic based, right? So interest rates, corporate earnings, geopolitical events, etc. Not necessarily that one is better than the other. Given the input, which was tell me about the outlook of stocks, there I can't say which one of these is better, but knowing the assumptions will helps out a lot. And then you have Llama as well. So general outlook of stock market, forecast predictions rather than historical data, time frames 2 years, really short-term period. Current year 2024, prices looking for mid 2024 to mid 2026. What are the current economic indicators such as GDP growth, inflation, right? So similar to what we had there, that might impact the market over the next 2 years. What predictions from reputable financial institutions, Federal Reserve, IMF, major investment banks regarding performance? Are there any potential risks or opportunities such as geopolitical events, and et cetera, et cetera? Right. And this one, because if you remember, our system request also had information about asking follow-up questions, right? So this can be useful if you want to actually ask the user additional questions, if you were to work that into your system here. But are you interested in a specific region or sector, right? Would you like to know more about any specific indices, right? So S&P 500, Dow Jones, some of the assumptions that were made in the Mistral model are sort of follow-up questions here. And are you looking bullish or bearish outlook, or a more neutral assessment, right? I don't know why you'd ever want one of specifics over a neutral assessment, but that's not for me. And so here I would then take this JSON. I'll have the original query because we want to use that in some other cases, but I'll have then my contextual query, and that's what I would send to either my RAG system or sort of directly to the model to then answer. And there we go. So here's the simple one I use. Feel free to use this and make it your own, right? And I'll actually save this prompt and just show what it looks like when we pull it up. Move that over into the other window. Yeah, here we go. And here we are. Moving a little bit, but all the information we have for explicit assumptions template. Here is the actual raw text from the prompt, but here is the formatted version, right? So here's the system information. Here are the user prompts, the user segments, and then the assistant segment, which is that first single shot response. And then we have the example that we tried with this outlook of stocks, and we made some assumptions. We have some latency information, some token information, although I think these are roughly all the same. Yeah, 300, 300, 300, and then 300 out, although Sonnet was slightly lower there. And so there you have it. A quick, simple prompt template I use a lot when I'm trying to add contextual information and trying to make assumptions more explicit. I'll leave a link to this in the description, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.